to all you lovely rock and metal heads out there. Welcome to episode 5 of Pyrotechnics, the podcast brought to you by Fireworks Rock and Metal magazine. Issue 102 is out now. You can get it from either WH Smith's or any other good news agents, or you can go to the website www.fireworksmagazine.com and you can either get it as a physical copy, which will be sent out to you, or as a digital download, so you can read it straight away. Got a couple of very, very interesting subjects today to discuss. Certainly going to create some debate, and hopefully you guys will get involved as well. Let us know your opinions on what we discuss. I'm very glad to be able to welcome alongside me today my two guests. We have Deputy Editor Dave Cockett. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
And we have Art Editor James Gaden. Hello, James.
Hello, everybody.
Right, chaps. Today I want to talk about a topic that divides opinion at best, and that is projects. And what I mean by projects is obviously when a record company gets a whole load of artists from different groups, sticks them together with either in-house writers or possibly their own writing team, they make an album and out it goes. As time has sort of passed, they've had these moniker given to them of supergroups, Sparks and Franz Ferdinand, FFS they became. And also more recently, Mac Busted, which is Busted and Mac Fly. I mean, I know it's not our genre of music that we listen to, but still labelled a supergroup. Are these projects, be them good or bad, are there too many of them? Do we think they are diluting the musical pool, or are they enhancing it with the crossover of talent? And when it comes to touring, how logistically possible is it? Is it feasible at all? I'm going to throw this one over to Dave and say, Dave, what is your opinions on this?
A murky, deep pool, shall we say. As you pointed out, it's nothing new. It's something that's been going on for donkey's years. You could go back to the days of the Monkees and argue that they were a band that were put together, but it was what that grew from that. That's the difference. I think that the problem that we've got now, and there are a number of factors, it's hard to sell CDs, to make any money from CDs. It's hard to get gigs, as Greg explained in his spot last week. It's even harder if you're nobody that people have heard of. So I kind of get it in some regards, but what we're seeing now is we're seeing, rather than proper bands who meet in a pub, get together, write a few songs, have a bit of a punch up, change members, write a few more songs, do a few gigs. What we're actually seeing now is that people are seeing that as too hard a route, and that Joe Bloggs from Scunthorpe and his band, nobody's ever heard of them, so we're not going to sell much on the back of that. So we're seeing a preference for somebody coming along and saying, okay, you know what, let's pick you, and you from these groups, and we'll put them together. And you're quite right. Perhaps in the past, they were called supergroups. Asia's a prime example. But Asia actually got together, wrote the songs themselves, then became something of a phenomenon, toured, recorded more music, etc., etc. Yes, they had shifts in lineup, but they actually became a proper band. My biggest bugbear with most of these days is that they never become a proper band. And you could argue, you can go back to the days. I remember, it was Richard Black from Shark Island, Michael Schenker, they did the Contraband thing, which was a pile of pants. That was a bit of a project, if you like, but wasn't called a project back then. It was a supergroup, but in principle it was the same thing. There are varying degrees of these things out there. There are the ones where somebody will come along to put two guys together from from two separate bands and say, okay, we'll put you two in a room together. Let's see if you can write some songs. Got no problem with that to a certain extent, because what you're doing is you're using the creativity of those people to actually generate potentially new music. Some of it might be good, some of it might be completely indifferent. You get examples where it works, like Black Swan. I thought Black Swan was, they've produced two really, really good albums. Are they a band? No, not really. Will they ever tour properly, apart from the odd gig once every 10 years at some sort of cobbled together festival? Probably not, but it doesn't take away from the fact that they've released two good albums and that they've actually added the canon of music that we're all listening to. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we almost going back to the days like Tin Pan Alley, where you've got in-house songwriters that are on a salary, that are churning them out like they're screwing tops onto toothpaste tubes in a factory production line. Forgive the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory reference there. But so what we've immediately got is we've got a raft of songs. And you could argue, well, that's exactly what we used to have in the days of Cliff Richard, Elvis. They didn't write their own material. Somebody did it for them. Okay, that's fair enough. I'll get that to a point. But they toured. They played regularly. They built up an audience. And they sold millions of records. Nowadays, so what we've got is we've got our in-house staff songwriters. And then it just seems to be a case of randomly picking, like, you from these bands. We've got a bit of a name. What we'll draft you in is we'll get you and we'll pay you to do some sessions. So you'll do some sessions, you'll record guitar parts or you'll record vocals on 10 tracks. And then we'll come up with a name and we'll stick it all together and we'll pop it out. And hopefully we'll sell a few copies. Fair enough. Again, ultimately comes back to the songs. If you've got, you think back to the days when bands like AC/DC, Rainbow, Deep Purple, when they were producing, some of them were producing back in the 70s, some of them were producing 2 albums a year, and that was a struggle. So you're talking about maybe 8-10 songs a time back then. And some were good at it, some weren't so good at it. As the bands got bigger, the albums tended to get further and further apart. But what we've got now is we've got songwriters, same songwriters sat there churning them out time after time after time after time. They must churn hundreds of these things out. And so you get them not even into a studio, because nobody goes into a studio these days. It's too expensive. What they'll do is they'll sit at home, they'll record it into the PC, and then somebody somewhere will pop it into a program and we've got a final mix. My biggest bugbear with them is that they all are starting to sound the same. The melodic rock arena is the biggest culprit. You don't see it so much in metal. You don't see it so much in alternative or symphonic or classic rock or anything like that. It's the sort of more melodic, the sort of 80s melodic rock. It's almost like somebody's looked at it and think, yeah, bubbles burst again. Obviously never got anywhere near the size it was in the 80s. But what are we going to do? How are we going to keep this market satisfied? Is projects the way to keep that market satisfied? Absolutely not. Because they get into the stage where they all sound the same. They've all got the same players on. Even if they've got players with names and a recognizable style, and I'll quote Billy Sheehan, for example. Why would you pick Billy Sheehan to appear on an album and then not have him sound like Billy Sheehan? Have him sound like Joe Schmo down the road? What's the point? Apart from using it as a marketing handle. We'll sell it because Billy Sheehan's in it. But that's, to me, it's a bit deceptive. It's deceitful on the public. You're trying to get them to spend money on something like that, when, in my opinion, they would be far better spending it on actual proper bands that wrote their own songs, bands that actually, even though they might struggle, have at least the opportunity to get out there and play as a band. Is it strangling the scene? Absolutely. I think it is. There's far too many of them. I think it's the easy and cheap option. And I think that it ought to stop. As I say, you'll get good examples and extreme bad examples, but most of it's in the middle. Most of it is a bit of a meh, and it all sounds the same, in my opinion.
Well, bringing you into this as well, James, I mean, Dave's made some superb points there. What do you think? Are there too many? Is it strangling the scene? What are your take on it?
For me, it's a case of the definition of a project has sort of changed. Because like Dave said there, that, you know, supergroups were projects. Some supergroups very short-lived. Some went on to be really successful. One of my favorite bands of all time is Mr. Big. Started as a supergroup, ended up going on making a whole raft of really good albums, and, you know, are now just remembered as a really good band. So I had a look through my my record collection at what I would class as being a project, and there's quite a few. But then I'm like, Coverdale Page, that's basically a project to me, because two guys got together with, you know, legendary backgrounds, made one album, played about 6 gigs in Japan. That was it. They probably wanted to do more, but it never went any further than that. So that to me is a project. And then like Hughes Turner project, Glenn Hughes and Jolyn Turner got together to make the album they thought Deep Purple should be making. It went down well. They made a second one. They did a couple of tours. They went their separate ways. That was it. It was never supposed to be a full-time thing for either of them. It was just something they did in association with their solo careers and the various other projects. Then you get things like they've mentioned Black Swan. I think that's a band to me because they write their own songs. Yes, they haven't played any gigs, but they're writing their own songs. But then you get like Revolution Saints, where most of the songs are written for them, specifically because this is going to be a vehicle for Dean Castronova, and we want it to sound like Journey. So here's some songs that sound like Journey for Dean to sing. And they have actually gone out and played, like Dave said, a show at Frontiers Festival or whatever it was. So they're now out there. They've played live. So does that make them a band? I don't think so. I think that's still very much in the project category. So it sort of blurs the lines. So for me, a project now is somebody, like Dave said, where it's a bunch of pre-written songs, guys come in, it's recorded, it's put out, and it'll never be thought of again. I'm not entirely sure why you would do that. For me, anytime one of these project things is announced, my first question is, who's writing the songs? If it's the guys involved, then I'd be interested. If you says, okay, we're going to get this singer and we're going to get that drummer and we're going to get this guitar player, but one of the people involved might be Jim Petrick, then I know that the songs are going to be coming from Jim Petrick. But if it's a case of, oh, we're going to get this guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, and all the songs will be written by the label's in-house writers, then my first thought, without hearing a note of it, is, well, that's going to be quite formulaic and much like the last one, then, isn't it? So that's where I sort of draw the line for me. There's some really good projects, and some of it I'm like Dave says, I don't really see the point, particularly when you bring people in and they're not putting their stamp on it as a writer, they're not putting their stamp on it as a musician. It's basically a session, and I don't really know why.
I mean, going over now to the touring part of it as well, we've already mentioned a couple of times where, you know, these things can't happen. The logistics of it just state it's too big a project or it just can't work. I mean, it just seems such a blatant letdown to the fans sometimes. I mean, like you rightly point out, you get some really good project albums, and let's be fair, you do. We can't be doom and gloom about them all. But the thing about music sometimes is you want to see them on the road. You want to see your heroes out there live playing, and this kind of thing just doesn't let itself to do it sometimes. I mean, is there any way that you guys can think around this? You know, what could the companies do apart from literally get them all in the room at the same time and shove them out on the tour, which, you know, as we pointed out, is unfeasible sometimes.
I don't see that it will ever become possible. It might become possible in one case, two cases, but when you're talking 20, 30, 50, 100 a year, it just ain't going to happen. Yeah, to pick up on what James said there, Jim Petrick, Pride of Lions is a great case in point. It's a project, started as a project, basically with him and Toby Hitchcock. And its remit seemed to be do what Survivor aren't doing. And to be fair, over, I think, is it 7 albums now? They've pretty much done that, which underlines one thing I've always thought, that Jim Petrick was the heart and soul of Survivor anyway. When he left, that was it. Good night, Vienna. But they're providing something now that Survivor aren't or can't. Would I like to see them on the road on a regular basis? Absolutely, because I think that they're saying something valid. As you say, Jim Petrick's special as a songwriter. He's a great songwriter, always has been. But the logistics of it mean that it just isn't feasible. Unless you can put bums on seats in 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 seaters, or in bigger venues than that, you're not going to be able to survive driving around in a van playing to 50 people. And I think that that's part of the problem that lots of bands, proper bands, are finding these days, that it's difficult to get gigs. It's difficult to break even at gigs, let alone make a profit. When you start then factoring in, I've got this musician here that's in this band, and 4 of these different projects, it then becomes even more of a logistical nightmare trying to put any sort of pieces together, to put any sort of cogent tour together. you get people, whenever we've interviewed them in the past, have always said, yeah, we're willing, we'd love to do this. But you know, at the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, this is never going to happen. It just isn't feasible. And I understand that. And I understand. I think part of it comes down to it's a question between, it can be summed up in 2 words, and that's music business. They're two completely, they're almost like mutually exclusive. There's music, which is creativity, and creating something new, crafting something that people want to listen to in this instance. And then there's business. And that means designing, developing, and selling people a product. And where you start off, it all starts off with great intentions. We've got this music, we'll pick it up, we'll manufacture your CDs, we'll take it to a bigger audience. Starts off with the best of intentions. Ultimately, it then comes along when you've had a few sort of failures, or you've had a few that haven't done as well as you thought that they would do. You're thinking, well, okay, as a businessman, this has got to make money. And I think that then becomes the ultimate driver. It became the driver in the late 80s, when everybody and his dog wanted to sign Bon Jovi, then they wanted to sign Guns N' Roses or the next version thereof. And I think that we've got, that's magnified now 1,000 times in the post-internet age, because we've got people have got access to millions of bands, projects, albums, whatever, at the touch of a button. Do people want to go out and see bands? Yes, I'm sure they do. You've only got to go down to Rock City on a Friday or Saturday night. They've got bands of all sorts of genres on there, and they usually get a good crowd. So people are certainly still wanting to go and see these sorts of bands. But I then sort of start to look back. Is okay? It's like everything else. People have got bills to pay. People have got food to put on the table. Prices are always rising exponentially at the moment. You want to sell people CDs. You want to sell people downloads. You want to sell people merch at your gigs. They've only got so much money. You show me somebody that is going to 7 gigs a week, and chances are it's a magazine or a record company that's paying for it, not be them.
Very true. I mean, James, coming over to you again, you know, this crossover, you know, bringing in people to write, bringing in people to play. Are we seeing possibly the way that, you know, music could be going? Are we seeing the sort of the death of the traditional band? Is this the way that you think that music might go? It might just all be a case of you and you do this, you do this. It's going to be written by him. It's going to be produced by him. He's done 900 of these already. It'll be fine.
I think there's a certain percentage of the label's roster is going to be made up of that, but I don't think it'll kill the actual bands off, because bands don't have to have a label these days. It can be helpful, but, you know, ultimately there are routes where you can, you know, do it all by yourself, and you might make some traction, you might not. But the amount of people I've interviewed, and I've said, like, you know, oh, you're doing this independently. You used to be on a label. Did you want a label? Like, well, to be honest, labels are basically just distributors now. There's nothing they're doing that I can't do myself. So in that respect, it's like, if you've got the contacts and you can recruit more that way, then I don't see any reason why a band wouldn't do that. For a project to tour, I don't think it's very likely. I think the only way it could possibly happen is if you took somebody like Black Swan, for example, and they were offered a support slot for a bigger band. That might work for them, but you've always got that problem that is 4 guys who do other things as well. The schedules would have to allow it. But logistically, it's going to be difficult. It's not like 4 guys looking actively for gigs. They've all got other things going on. So I don't think you'll see many projects too. I think it will be the odd festival appearance, if that.
I mean, it certainly sounds, doesn't it? That it's a debate that can go on for ages and ages. This, I mean, as we pointed out, we've got to point out, like, I mean, to be fair, there are very good projects.
Absolutely.
And there are some shocking projects. I mean, we can probably spend this hour alone just sort of naming projects that haven't worked, naming projects that do work. But it's obviously an argument that, you know, is very close to people, especially in the music business, and quite rightly so. I mean, what do you think, listeners? Do you agree with projects? Do you think, you know, that they should happen? Are they happening too much? I mean, that seems to be one of the things that I notice all the time, especially when I get albums sent to be reviewed. It sort of seems that the high majority now are projects, you know. So Is there just too many of them? People, let us know your opinions. You go out and buy the CDs. Would you like to see them on tour? Let us know. Write down in the comments. Dave and James again have raised some excellent points. But argue with them. Do you think they're wrong? Let us know. This is a great thing about these kind of podcasts. It's a debate. So let's get one going. Again, gentlemen, we could go on for ages about this one topic alone. Maybe we should have scheduled a 2.5-hour session and had an podcast on this.
I will add one thing, just because we have seen like a little bit negative towards projects. Occasionally, the projects do serve a purpose, and that's to highlight an artist you maybe weren't really aware of before. Because when I joined Fireworks, most of the writers knew about Cockett. I didn't. My first experience with Danny Vaughan was hearing the From the Inside album, which was basically a project to showcase Danny Vaughan. And I heard him, I was like, bloody hell, he's good. Who's that? And then asking my colleagues, it was like, you will go listen to Cockett, and that's what made me start listening to Cockett. That was my route to finding Danny Vaughan as an artist. So there are examples where projects can be used for showcasing. So it's not totally without merit.
I get where you're coming from, James, but that's just the same argument. If throw enough shit at a wall, some of it's going to stick. Yeah. Or you get enough monkeys with typewriters that one of them's eventually going to come up with the complete works of Shakespeare. It has its place, absolutely. But traditionally, that kind of thing was an A&R man's job, hunting talent. Not actually throwing enough out there and just then letting the public decide. Because as we know, that there's a large section of the public's probably got the attention span of your average goldfish. So I will take the hat off to the ones that are good. I'll hold my head into the hands to the ones that are truly awful. As to the rest, I'll just shuffle them out the door, because you heard them once, you've heard one, you've heard them all. Yep, fair enough.
There you go, folks. Again, very strong opinions. And like I said, one that we could probably debate for many hours in a day. But we're going to move on now. So we're going to park that one for the moment. But gentlemen, the group Journey, what is happening to them? Every time I go on social media, somebody's suing somebody in the group. Somebody's suing somebody that used to be in the group. Somebody that used to be in the group suing someone that's in the group. Our guitarists are arguing with the frontmen are arguing with the drummers don't know who they're arguing with, but they're arguing with somebody, and it's all over social media. I mean, this used to be, in my opinion, a very proud group years and years and years ago, but nowadays it seems like we'll play the occasional show, then we're going to go on Facebook or social media and just have a bit of a go at one another. James, what are your opinions on this?
Yeah, Journey. Just like it's a rock soap opera, isn't it, really? For me, they've just become embarrassing. I was never the biggest Journey fan. I know loads of people at the magazine, loads of people in the rock industry. Two of our big advertisers are literally named after Journey albums. It's like, oh, Journey. For me, they're a good band, but I always thought they were a little bit wimpy, personally. When it came to like bands who did rock songs and power ballads, I always thought the aforementioned Survivor and Foreigner were far better, in my opinion. But that was just me. Journey have done, I've got a best of Journey, and that's pretty much all I need. I've not really got the full big deep back catalogue, but I see what's going on. It's embarrassing. It's like, oh yeah, Jonathan Cain's got security, so Neil Sean can't go in his room. But then Neil Sean's got security, so Jonathan Cain can't go in his room. And then they're actually arguing over whose private security guard would actually outrank the other one. And it's like playground stuff. And then you've got Jonathan Cain played at Summit Donald Trump had. So then Neil Sean says, you can't do that. That's political and that divides opinion. And I'm like, well, he wasn't going out as Journey. He was doing it as Jonathan Cain. That's his own personal preference. And he was playing songs he co-wrote. So I'm not really sure that that's a problem. And then in the next instance, you had Neil Sean decides to do a tacky pay-per-view wedding, and it's fine for him to play Journey songs at that to his grinning bride. Who is interested in that? You're supposed to be in a rock band together. You're doing all this like daft reality stuff, and then Valerie's out the band and Steve Smith's out the band, and we're bringing Narada Michael Walden, and he's a producer and he can produce the new album, and it's the worst produced album we've ever done. And we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on these new records, but nobody's buying them because we're just going out and playing a greatest hits set every night. We've got a drummer whose singer is better than our actual singer. It's just a bit of a farce. And basically, they're just a nostalgia act. They're going out and they're playing the old hits. They still knock out the odd album every now and again, but nobody's that bothered. And then you get Dean Castronova saying, "Oh, well, when we go on stage, all the bullshit's forgotten. We just play the songs." Well, get on with playing the songs then and leave all the other stuff off Blabbermouth and TMZ and all these other sort of like tabloidy style sites. Nobody cares.
I mean, the latest one I saw, and Dave, I'm sure you'll probably have an opinion on this as well, is that Slons apparently said that is it Pineda, the new singer, he wouldn't be anything without Journey. I mean, to say that on public social media, if he has done, I mean, we've got to point out social media isn't exactly the most reliable source when it comes to anything factual. But if he has indeed said this when the two are still in the same band at the same time, it can't be good for the band's morale, surely.
I agree pretty much with what James said. Actually, I was never the biggest Journey fan. Frontiers was always my favourite album because it was a rockier, guitar-edged Neil Schon album, whereas the stuff like Trial by Fire was clearly Steve Perry and Put Me to Sleep, if I'm honest with you. But whilst they've never been my favourite band, and I would always pick Foreigner and then Journey, Foreigner, then Survivor, then Journey, I appreciate that there are millions of people out there that love the band. And I think that if you, on balance within the genre, they produced some great music back in the day. I don't think they've produced any outstanding music since Arrival. I thought the last album had some good songs, but as James has already pointed out, the production was horrendous. The levels were up and down all over the place. It sounded like a collection of demos that were recorded at different times and then sort of thrown together to me, which spoiled what could have been a really good comeback album for Journey. But I'm cynical. I know that they can go out and they can tour as a nostalgia act and they can fill arenas in the States and probably can over here in Europe from time to time. But I think that they actually ran out of anything positive to say in musically a long time ago. And I think now that they're perhaps realizing that perhaps sales are down in terms of concert tickets. So they've got to do something to make people aware that they're still alive. And the cheapest and easiest and way is to get onto social media and start kicking up a bit of a stink. I think it's sad that there are clearly problems, and it will all come down to money ultimately. As if you're getting 10 million in royalties this year and I'm only getting 9.5. Why is that? Most people would sell their right arm for that sort of income. But everything now has to be played out in the media. Nothing seems to be able to be done in private. Now, whether that's a choice, and I get that when you live your life in a goldfish bowl, and these people are celebrities, they're not like Joe Schmo, as we talked about earlier, from down the street in his band playing the pub. They are celebrities. People are interested. But I think that that's indicative of the sort of society that we live in, is that people are interested in the absolute banal minutiae of everybody's life. You've only got to look at the growth of reality TV shows, where most of them shouldn't be allowed to vote, let alone breed. So it doesn't surprise me, but it saddens me that it's got to this. And it's either got to this because they've realised that the game's up, or it's a cynical move that's been calculated well beforehand to actually preempt the game being up and to try and raise the profile once again. And I know that we've gone through these. There's another rock and roll circus. We talked about Motley Crue. It was the same thing that happened 10 years ago with Queensryche. It now seems to be the norm, rather than you get a statement in the press that the band have gone their separate ways due to musical differences. Now all the dirty laundry gets aired in public, and it detracts from the music. It detracts from what it is. it just saddens me, I must admit.
I mean, the one thing you've actually touched on something that I was going to point out as well, and I want to bring James into this one. Is this really happening, or is it just a cynical PR move? Where they, like you say, they're trying to, the company's gone, let's get some publicity for, these guys. Let's throw a bit of mud around, but really behind the scenes, they're all high-fiving one another and slapping each other on the back and saying, "Aren't we clever?" I mean, James, do we think any of this is actually true, or is it just a case of they just really don't like one another?
I think cynical PR move is quite plausible. Like I said, when you have a guitarist who does a pay-per-view wedding, I mean, talk about desperately vying for attention. So, Jonathan Cain said this and Neil Sean said that, and they hate each other, but they'll bury the hatchet to go on stage. It sounds like what Fleetwood Mac did 50 years ago, but not real. It's like, for me, once Steve Perry left, Journey were finished. They've gone through. They had Steve Algary. The only time I've ever seen them live, they had Jeff Scott Soto. I thought they were very good with Jeff. I thought they could have maybe gone somewhere there, but they didn't. They decided, no, actually, we'll get some bloke off YouTube. So, in fairness, that comment about Arnold would be nothing without Journey is probably true. Would he likely have broken through as a big time rock star had he not been plucked from obscurity via the internet? Unlikely. But as you say, that's not something to put on social media. That's not exactly a morale booster. So whether that's even been said or it's just been put out there to like, oh look, Jenny are fighting again. Everyone read about it. I'm not so sure, but I don't really see how it makes people care anymore about the band. For people like me and Dave, it just makes you think, oh, not again.
I mean, that's the other thing as well, isn't it? I mean, the history they've had, the future they might have had. It just seems so damaged now that, like you say, is it almost a case of they're just a joke of a band now and people are just not going to pay them any attention? I mean, Dave, have you got any final words on this one?
I don't think that people aren't going to pay them any attention. As you say, they do brisk business in the States. They'll fill plenty of arenas, but putting together an 80s greatest hits set. And if you want to see that, that's great. However, that leads on to the whole other thing about that then siphoning money away from bands who are actually releasing something new, something worthwhile. And ultimately, they'll get too old. They will get too old. They're not going to wheel them out in bath chairs. Or perhaps they might. But there comes a point when they physically won't be able to go out there and do it anymore. Do they need the money? I suspect not. Why? So why do they do it? I guess that milk it while it's there. But it just seems to be they've made themselves a laughing stock. They're not the only ones by any means. They should have packed in a long time ago. Quit while they were ahead. Quit whilst they were on top. Yes, much as I'm not a huge fan of Steve Perry's voice, I would argue that he was Journey. Really, that was the best sort of era. As I mentioned, I did like the Stevie Aory years. I loved Arrival. I thought that was the best thing that they'd done since Frontiers. To pick up on Arnell, yes, chances are he would never have broken through. Certainly not from where he came from. Without the exposure on YouTube, so it was a 1 in a million find. But you could argue as well, without finding him, would Journey have continued on? Steve Perry wouldn't have been able to do it. Certainly wouldn't have been able to get on stage for more than 10 minutes without suing one another. But it's indicative of a wider thing that the old generation of bands seem reluctant to let go when perhaps they should, and they're taking money away from something new going forward. So I think that we're potentially faced in 10, 15 years' time with a bit of a void. When there's no more Rolling Stones, there's no more Scorpions, Maiden have called it a day, and all these bands that used to fill arenas now aren't there. They can't do it anymore. I mean, for Christ's sake, how much longer can the likes of Yes or Deep Purple or whatever go on? They're all in the 70s or 80s. So when we get to the stage where there aren't any more of these, there's no more bands come along to fill that void. So what are we going to get in these big shows? Are we basically going to see the likes of Bjorn again playing big tribute shows to 50,000 people at Wembley? Is that the future of music? I hope not, but I suspect that it's going to be a big part of it.
Well, again, some very good thoughts there. I mean, James, do we say the formula for this one is Journey at the moment equals ego?
I think the one underlying thing, so there was a period where Journey was basically a trio of Kane, Sean, and Perry. And that is where I think the musical differences started kicking in. Because if Journey was left to Neil Sean, it would be a guitar-orientated rock band. If it was left to Jonathan Cain, it'd be a piano-led ballad band. And if it was left to Steve Perry, it'd be like soulful pop songs. And they're all pulling in different directions. And Steve Perry eventually was like, well, I'm off. I'm going to be a solo artist. And he did. And he made a couple of albums. And then he spent decades not doing anything. And then he came back with a solo album. And there was more excitement for that than anything Journey had done in quite some time. And I always remember reading an anecdote that I forget which tour it was, but Sean was sound checking and he's riffing away and shredding, and Perry went over and he turned down Sean's amps and just went, they want to hear the voice. And that's probably true, because that is basically, like Dave said, Perry was Journey. The top tier of Journey's albums was led by Steve Perry's vocals. And I think Neil Sean's always wanted to make Journey harder. I remember reading once, this would be a good topic for another podcast, people who could have been in bands. I remember he wanted Jimmy Barnes to join Journey. Now, that would definitely have made Journey a rock band.
Yeah.
But that never happened. They could have gone that way with Jeff Scott Soto. That never happened. They decided to get Arnold, who basically is a guy who's a bit like Steve Perry. He can do the job. So that's obviously what they wanted. We'll just stick with what people know. And I think Sean would love to make a proper balls out rock album with Journey, but I don't think Cain would have that. I think if it was left to him, there'd be lots of Christian infused love songs. And they're like poles apart in where they want, but neither of them dare leave because they've got this sort of, like Dave said, this cash cow that just can go out and tour 100 dates a year, whatever it is, in the States, playing basically the same set list every night, the greatest hits, everyone's a winner. So for me, there's not really any merit to what Journey are doing now. They are, at least like Foreigner have decided, we're calling it a day. We'll play the greatest hits one last time and that's it, we're done. That's fine. But Journey just seemed content to be like, we'll just do it again and again and again. And I think people just get bored of it.
Let us know. Have the guys hit it on the head again? Is Journey over? Are we ever going to see a good Journey album again? Are we ever going to see them become what they could have been, what they should have been? Are they ever going to stop fighting? Let us know. Put your comments down below. And if you like this episode, give it a like, give it a share, give us a repost. It does help this brand grow. And obviously, everything we're trying to do here is helping the magazine as well. But again, gentlemen, thank you so much. I mean, this is another debate. Obviously, we could spend a couple of hours on. I think it's a rather passionate one as well. Let's go to some reviews now. I know Dave's heard an album that's really caught his ear, so I'm going to throw this one over to Dave. And Dave, please tell us about it.
Okay. What you're talking about there, Pete, is it's an album called Towers of Gold. It's on No Remorse, who are a Greek record label, and the band are called Sacred Outcry. Mm-hmm. It's the second album. The band have been around, it probably started as a project for 20 years. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the guy who's the mainstay, the songwriter, whatever, but it caught my ear because it's melodic power metal, it's epic melodic power metal, and I accept that there are an awful lot of bands out there that compete in that arena, and again, there are more and more of them that sound exactly the same. But this one came across as different. It seemed to go that extra mile. When the first track kicked in was a bit of a sort of 2-minute intro that gradually built, and then it exploded. And then my first thought was, wow, that sounds like Stratovarius, who have always been one of my favourite bands. And then as the album sort of progressed, I'm hearing bits of Blind Guardian, I'm hearing bits of Maiden, I'm hearing bits of Nocturnal Rites. And then they go back to some of the sort of the 80s big, pompous, overblown bands, a bit like Manowar without the silly bits, or Warlord, or and most importantly, I don't know if people remember a Swedish band from about 20 years ago called Lost Horizon. They released a couple of really promising albums and then disappeared. But what really caught my ear about this was that this band, Sacred Outcry, have actually got the Lost Horizon vocalist, a guy called Daniel Hyman. And if you've not heard him, check him out on YouTube. Check out Sacred Outcry's stuff on there with him on it. He's absolutely phenomenal. Guy has got a superb voice. He takes what are already a great set of songs. They're full of atmosphere, they're full of melody, they're full of passion. There's a real dynamic to the album as it swings from high to low. So it's not all on one level all the way through. But just listen to the guy. His voice is absolutely incredible. It was in Lost Horizon, to be fair, and 20 years later, he seems to have lost none of it. But as I say, there was a track like The Voyage, and I should say that all the tracks, it's a bit of a concept theme, and all the tracks have a title and then something after it in brackets. So I'm not even going to go. But the one that's The Voyage, I listened to it and I thought, that sounds like Saracen. Does anybody remember Saracen? But then with Iron Maiden thrown into the top, it was just bombastic, big, brash, bold, filled your head with the melodies, and it stuck. And I think that's 90% of the battle these days, is to actually to get something that comes along, that you play it through once and you think, yeah, first thing I want to do is play that again. Because I remember, and then you play it through and I remember that bit, I remember that bit, and I remember that bit. And then by the third playthrough, you're either duck walking up and down the front room throwing shapes like Angus, or you're singing along to the choruses. To me, then, therefore, job done. Album's done exactly what it set out to do. So, again, as I say, I can thoroughly recommend it. It's out on No Remorse Records. It's called Towers of Gold, and the band are called Sacred Outcry.
Superb. There you go, people. There's one to look out for straight away. James, in amongst all the other things that you do as well, and obviously the magazine and your various other projects as well, you do actually get to listen to some music. I don't know how you sleep, to be fair with you. But what's caught your ear this time?
I play music constantly while I work. It's the only way I can get it done. But yeah, I did. It was one I was assigned, and it came as a bit of a surprise because I love Thunder, and Luke Morley has just released. Well, he's just about to release a new solo album, and I had no idea that he'd even been working on one. And I assumed, because most people I assume know, that Danny Bowes had an accident where he ended up in quite bad shape. He fractured his skull. He ended up with a bleed on the brain, had a stroke, and a whole host of horrible things. So Thunder are basically on hold for the moment while Danny recovers. So I thought, oh, maybe Luke's decided I'll put out a solo album in the interim. No, it turns out he'd actually started doing this in lockdown when everyone was sat at home, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything. So he just started writing some songs to keep himself sane. And his wife had said, they sound quite good with you singing them. Why don't you put out an album? And he's like, maybe I will. And there's an interview that I did with him in the upcoming issue. And it's one of my favourite interviews I've done. He was really open, really candid. And I said to him, because he's made one solo album back in 2001, I think it was, something like that. And he was like, yeah, that was basically Japanese label gave me some money. I put some songs together I'd line about, and that was it. With this one, he made a concerted effort to make a solo album. He says, I actually sat and thought about what I was writing. I keep the songs knowing it was going to be me singing them. And he's played most of the instrumentation himself. And his singing is really good because, like I say, he knew it would be him singing them. So his vocals, he's done a really good job. And it's a nice eclectic album. There's 2 or 3 on there that you say, these could be Thunder songs if they were given a bit more oomph and it had Danny singing. But then he's like, because it is more a singer-songwriter album, he's gone off on all different tangents. Lyrically, it's really good. Like Dave mentioned about people putting the minutiae of their banal everyday lives on social media. There's a song about that, which is really cool. He goes in all different directions musically. I complimented on him his bass playing on it because some of it there's real funky elements and things like that. And it's just a really cool album that I wasn't expecting. I didn't know he was even making. It won't be for every Thunder fan, but some Thunder fans will probably think Luke Morley's even better than I thought he was. Because I've always rated him as a good guitar player and a very good songwriter. But when you listen to this, you realise just how versatile he is. So that, for me, is well worth a listen.
And when's that one out?
Very soon. I'm not sure the exact day, but it's soon. It's imminent. I know that.
And Dave, the one that you've been listening to, that one's out now, yeah?
It's due very soon.
Right.
I think it's later this month.
Brilliant. Well, there you go again, listeners.
It'll be out by the time the issue hits. So,
two great choices. I just want to throw in. It's not a new album in respects of it's been out for a while, but this will make James smile as well. Roger Taylor. Listening to Outsiders. Again, it's. I always think. I mean, again, James and Dave. I don't know what you think to this, but Roger Taylor to me always seems underrated, and I don't know why. I mean, I'm going back to his Fun in Space albums, his A Strange Frontiers albums. They're really, really good. I mean, they're one of those albums, although they're kind of albums, they just seem to get better with age. And I know Freddie got the plaudits and Queen, superb group altogether. But I think Roger, like we were saying before with Brian May, he's not just a rock guitarist. He can do pretty much everything. And I think Roger Taylor kind of fits into that as well, because you listen to his stuff and I don't know what it is. I mean, it's just fantastic. I just love it. I don't know why. I just do. I mean, that's the beauty of music. It just gets you and you go along for the journey. But I always think he's been so highly underrated. I mean, what do you guys think?
I think that the only reason I can think of that he's underrated is because he was in a band with Freddie Mercury and then Brian May, who were more rated. So he tended to get sort of pushed into the background a little bit, which, to be fair, so did John Deacon. 4 superb musicians who were part of one of the best bands that there's ever been. There will never be another Freddie. There will never be another Queen. There'll be lots that try, but I agree with you. I mean, I think that they were all 4 wonderfully superb musicians. You might not like everything that they did because you look at Freddie and some of the more classical type stuff that he did, but that was just an indication of what attitudes were like back then. That it was much freer. You weren't regimented and pigeonholed into this. You could be what you wanted to be as an artist, and you were allowed that freedom of expression. And I think that, to their credit, to both Brian and Roger's credit, that they've been allowed to bring that forward because people were used to it. That was the base point that they started at, with such a huge wide base of material, that they're now that they can continue to do that. And I think that that's what a lot of the newer bands aren't allowed to do. But to pull it back to what you said, I mean, Roger Taylor, underrated, yes, but by who? Certainly not by me.
James, I mean, I know you've had the honour of speaking to the gentleman himself many, many times. I mean, what do you make of his music?
Well, you're preaching to the choir. Roger Taylor, for me, is my all-time musical hero. If I, on my wall bar, I've got a huge Roger Taylor poster. He is the GOAT for me. It was Queen were the first band I got into, but I was always drawn to Roger Taylor. I was just like, that guy on drums is so cool. Who is he? And then I heard him singing. I was like, that guy on drums is such a good singer. Who is he? And then that was it. That set me on my Roger Taylor journey. So I've got everything he's ever released and a bunch of stuff he's never released. But yeah, everything he's made I've liked. The Outsider album was a nice surprise. And again, that was one of the few positive things to come from lockdown is a bunch of people made albums that probably wouldn't have bothered otherwise. But he was sat at home with literally nothing else to do. I'll write a song, I'll record a song, because he's a multi-instrumentalist. I mean, he basically does everything on Outsider himself. And he ended up, probably got an album here, I'll put that out. Much to my delight and many, many other people. And then he decided, you know what, I'm going to tour this. And that was phenomenal because I saw him on the Electric Fire tour, which was 1998, and he hadn't done a solo tour since. So I went to see him. I saw him in York. He was brilliant. And I was like, oh, big bucket list tick that. That was phenomenal. And then he only went and made a live album. So it was like a double whammy. It was like that. It didn't get any better. I wasn't expecting a studio album. And I got a double live album on top. So for me, he can do no wrong. I loved everything he did with The Cross. I've loved all his solo albums. And, his contributions to Queen. He's written some belters for them as well, Kind of Magic, Radio Gaga, the list goes on. So he's the man, in my opinion.
You know what really upset me, and this is going to sound so stupid, but I was over in Newcastle to see Michael Bublé. It was my wife's present before anyone slates me. Actually, there's another podcast, and it's funny enough, about people that are great showmen, but not necessarily great performers, if you know what I mean. So we'll do that another time. And we went into HMV in Newcastle, and The Outsiders was the album that I saw, and it was reduced to £6.47. And I was like, this can't be true. It's got to be full price. It's that good. It's excellent, you know. And so it sounds so stupid, but it really did upset me to see his latest album down at £6.47, and I don't know why. And it's very, very silly, but you know, it is an underrated album again. And as James has rightly pointed out, it's a superb one. I do. If you do like Queen, you've got to go and listen to it. If you don't like Queen, you still got to go and listen to it. It really is a good album. And then check out the rest of his back catalogue.
Absolutely. I don't think Outside is even his best one.
No. I mean, I got to admit, call me old-fashioned, but I still think Fun in Space is the best one.
Oh, I do have a lot of love for Fun in Space because it's the first one I heard. But for repeated plays, it's the moodiest. But I think Happiness is the best crafted. But Roger, he said Electric Fire is probably his most underrated because it's got something for everyone. You can't really argue with that because that's a pretty eclectic record. It covers most bases there.
Dave, you're nodding your head as well. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you know, gentlemen, I think we touched upon 3 subjects here that we could go on all day about. You know, I mean, it's such a shame in some respects we have to have a limit to these podcasts. I think there's lots of things that we certainly will be touching on in the future. I do thank you again, gentlemen. You've raised some absolutely superb points, and we've got some great new music to look out for as well. Or in Roger's case, obviously go and check it out. It's out now. Listeners, do you agree with what the gentlemen have said? You know, do you agree with their views on these projects, and do you agree with their views on Journey? Have you got any albums you want to recommend as well? Have you got any points that you want to, you know, let us know about? We can discuss other stuff as well. You know, we've got a list of things a mile long. I mean, James this morning has just sent me an email that I'll add to the list. It's the computer's running out of memory at this rate. I tell you the amount of things we want to discuss. But if you've got things as well that's on your chest you want to get off them, you know, let us know. We can stick them in the mix as well and see what happens. I'm going to wrap this up now because, again, we're starting to run out of time. I've been Pete Arnett, your host. I would like to say goodbye to both Dave. Goodbye, Dave.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Bye.
And I'd like to say goodbye to James. Goodbye, James.
Bye, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you again.
Indeed. Don't forget, people, that issue 102 of Fireworks is out now. You can go to WH Smith's or other good news agents to buy it. You can also go on our website, www.fireworksmagazine.com, and get it from there as well. It's available as a digital download, or you can get the physical copy sent out to you. Keep listening to the music you listen to. Keep enjoying it. That's what it's there for. But above all, people, until next time, take care. All views expressed in this show are from the individual and not necessarily that of Fireworks Rock and Metal Magazine.